Hey! This is trap theory. Greetings, programs. It's Hanker and Fernell here, back once again. Welcome to Runehammer. We're going to play some D&D like big old grown-ass men and women, and it's going to be awesome. Traps. No idea what I'm doing. I'm new here. Trap theory. Basically, traps, the art of creating traps is the art of being a dungeon master. They are one in the same. They are the essence of all that we do, and so we're going to do it better, and we're going to think it through with the big brain and with the small brain. Three big pieces of the concept to bring your trap game mo up. All right, first, no mo puzzles. Second, we're going to talk about trap design. It's my best shot at what all the fundamental conceptual pieces are that you need to build and execute super cool traps. And I mean trap in the biggest sense of the word, the capital T. Hell, screw it. All the letters are capital. Third, we're going to talk about the most deadly part of building dope traps. And no, it's not tumbling spiked wheels. It's not giant chandeliers filled with spiders. No, it is time, my friends. Time. I wrote it twice because two time. Bang, bang. Go through these three topics and we're going to talk about traps. Now, a lot of you guys know traps from back in the day. It's been a huge part of the hobby forever, all the way back to Grimtooth. The Grimtooth books were amazing, but it took the trap art to a bit of a gag place. It became a Rube Goldberg machine. It became kind of a gag, an art of gags. And I don't think that traps are a gag. I think it's one of the most fundamental concepts to being an awesome dungeon master. And so it is worth a bunch of work and a bunch of deep thinking to get us a video that is going to up the trap game. Now, that doesn't just mean like a pressure plate and then you fall in a pit. Now, that does apply, though. That needs to fit into our discussion. But our discussion needs to go way beyond the pressure plate and falling in a pit. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to step on a pressure plate and we're going to fall in a pit. Actually, speaking of pressure plates, there's something. What could this be right here? Ah! Okay, before we really get into the nuts and bolts and the guts of this trap theory concept and this big talk about how to build, design, and execute awesome traps in all their different conceptual forms, there's a little bit of a word of a warning or a don't do that I want to get into first. No more puzzles. I know that puzzles are part of the hobby in a lot of ways, part of some adventures and so on and so forth. But to me, a puzzle is a way to while away the hours of retirement. A puzzle is something to pass the time at the airport. A puzzle, to me, implies a calm decoding of a series of rules and convoluted hidden solutions to pass the time. Now, anyone who has ever faced a real puzzle in a game knows exactly what I'm talking about. You while away the hours doing these things. And sometimes you get the DM like making this weird snickering face, like gloating over the fact that you're not solving it. And you just want to roll your character's intelligence to solve the damn thing. But it really winds up being player wits that solve puzzles. And to me, that's just blah. Bleh. I really like fast-paced RPG playing, right? Now, I mean, if one critique could be levied against the whole Runehammer style, is that it's too fast-paced, it's too breakneck. There isn't time for this more relaxed puzzle-style feeling, and I fully accept that critique. If you don't like a more fast-paced, more intense kind of feeling tabletop game, then this Runehammer stuff is not going to work out for you. It's going to feel forced and rushed and blah. Before we really think deeply about traps, we need to realize that traps are not puzzles. There is a big difference here. And the difference is the constraint of time and the implication of danger. Okay, a puzzle, you can work on a crossword puzzle all afternoon. As a matter of fact, that's what it's designed for. And there is no danger when you're like, oh, hey, my taxi's here. I'll close up my crossword puzzle and go about my day. That's a puzzle. A trap is something very, very different. And I'm going to help you, I hope, expand your concept of what that can really be. Perfect example to see the difference between a puzzle and a trap to wrap up this little part of our talk is the Doors of Moria, right? Or the Doors of Durin as they're known. So everybody knows this thing, speak friend and enter. It's an elvish riddle, right? Now sometimes dungeon masters like to put riddles in their games And it really does wind up being player intelligence that solves riddles, unless you can just have a character roll his intelligence. He makes the roll and the dungeon master tells you the solution to the riddle. That's how I would run it. But if you're doing a sort of quote unquote puzzle, to me that cheats the puzzle. So you would want players to solve the riddle of the Doors of Durin, right? Which is they just have to remember that you just have to say the word out loud. And it's really quite a simple riddle, but that is not a puzzle in the Lord of the Rings. That is a trap. Why? Because of the river beast. The river beast makes that whole thing a trap. They are prey. The river beast sits right there by the side of the river because the doors are right there. People come like explorers and adventurers and they poke around to those doors and scratch their chins and try to solve that riddle until the moon comes out and that thing comes out of the river and eats them. It's an anglerfish. And the Doors of Durin are the little squiggly proboscis, the Antennicus. Here's the Doors of Durin right here. Here's Frodo, and then Merry throws the rock in and I'm like, I'm the river beast in this particular scenario. Anyways, the Doors of Durin to me are a trap for that reason. There was a limited amount of time for them to solve that riddle. Now remember in the story, they kind of sit there and they get bored while Gandalf is trying to solve the riddle. That could still only be for Gandalf like 3 intelligence rolls that he had to make. He missed the first 2, then he misses the 3rd one, and then Frodo's like, maybe I'll give it a try, and he makes an intelligence roll. So actually it's sort of like 4 rounds that pass. That's eternity. That is an eternity in a tabletop game. And so the whole time the river beast has his D4 timer on him, and here he comes. So when you put it down in tabletop terms, the doors are a trap that I set as the DM, or you could think of it as the river beast having set it as to get prey. But either way, that to me is a trap. All right, that's step 1. Now let's go to the much more interesting piece, which is trap design and the pieces and the fundamental concepts and chunks that you're going to need to create an infinite number of traps. And I've got them right here on my board. So just come on in. Come on in. Let's get into this. Let's get into the guts of it. Come on. Don't be shy. Come on in. Ooh. Oh boy, it's a big old board full of cool things. I love it when there's a big old board full of cool things. Here's what I wanted to kind of throw at you guys. You see if you're picking up what I'm laying down out there, all right? Which is the parts and pieces that conceptually I see as being clutch for designing an infinite number of traps. And the concept of a trap is what I really want to expand. And when we get into the final topic here of how time can expand what a trap truly is, I would actually suggest that almost every single thing that you do as a dungeon master can and should be a trap. Kind of strange, like I'm always going to be hitting tripwires and stepping on plates and stuff like that. No, the concept is deeper. It's basically a way to get all of the elements of exciting play in everything that you do, which takes the form of traps, of trapping players. And trapping involves several concepts that I think are represented by all these pieces right here. So now, imagine with me, if you will, that when I give you a certain example, you can expand it into myriads of variations, okay? So the first one that is the most interesting is this little guy right here, this little gentleman. Now, this is just a humble little treasure chest. This has a little gold lock on the front of it. It's got, gold hinges on the back and, probably some weird runes carved into it that are difficult to translate. This is it. This is the thing players want, almost more than anything, besides like being glorified in the story. This is it. This is the thing. Now, the reason that I mention this first on our list of trap objects is that this little guy is the lure, or the bait. The reason that they have to do anything. Now, in the concept of conventional trap, it can literally be a treasure chest. There's a treasure chest sitting right over there. Oh, hey, I'm going to go get that. And so I walk over there to get the treasure chest, and I die. This is the reason that players are going into danger, are entering anything but a desirable situation, are leaving the safety of their fortresses. Now, for the sake of this discussion, it's represented by this symbol. But this symbol is just a single instance. Your lure can be anything. So let's do that first. Bait. Now, next, just to be funny, here's a switch. Now, that's the bait and the switch, right? The switch is one of the oldest and most common devices in the storytelling of a trap, right? You basically, on the far side of a stretch of dungeon or a stretch of a cave or an open field or a mountain pass, whatever, there's a lever over there. And when you pull the lever, it is now safe to cross this space. So you need to get one player over there somehow safely. He pulls the lever and then the party can move across while they're fighting ogres or whatever, right? This is super classic stuff that everybody has done in their game. And if you haven't, well, there you just had a great idea for your next encounter. I hope it's a great idea. Switch, really common piece of trap design, but you'll see it can expand in what it can be. Next, we've got some more sort of basic stuff. I have my my Shoggoths here, my green Shoggoths, and they just represent monsters, enemies, any kind of monster, any kind of enemy. It doesn't matter, but it's a fundamental tool that you're going to need for making good traps. And next, you see I have a whole terrain kit here. I've got some short walls, I've got long walls, I've got some more of these sort of more like hard stone walls. Then I have blocks. And between those things, I can make confined space. Now this is an essential part of any trapping concept. Even if the trap is a box canyon to lure a dragon in, even if a trap is the Pelennor Fields in front of Minas Tirith, you have to think in some kind of manageable space that can be confined in some fashion. Otherwise, when things get hairy, there's nothing to keep players who are still mortal from just using the completely open space to flee, hide, disappear, whatever. Walls or blockers. But I'm trying to keep these concepts as huge as possible so that you can see we aren't just designing a pressure plate on the floor that plops you in a pit. We are designing the Battle of Pelennor Fields. We are designing the battle at Rainbow Cataract near Gondolin. We are designing any form of encounter that's going to have tension because it is a form of trap. Now, of course, always you gotta have some doors handy. You want the coolest doors? Talk to Black Magic Craft, he's your man. But I just make them out of plopsicle sticks. If you're out in the Pelennor Fields or you're in a more abstract space, what's a door? Well, that's what gets interesting about designing your trap, is instantiating these concepts into multiple instances. Finally, over here, we got some more literal stuff. We've got spikes. Now, spikes to me represent danger. Danger is different than an enemy. Danger is this sort of intrinsic harm, okay? So actually, let's just change it to harm. So I've got my spike things. I've also got these cannons here, which I could use as gas or flame emitters or spike shooters or whatever, but they're harm causers. So you see how the concepts are getting a little bit more abstract? A harm causer could be anything. It could be the Nazgul. It could be fire shooting out of a vent in the wall. So now we have, just to be nice and solidly tropey, we've got some floor plates. But what we're going to call them is triggers. A trigger can be anything. It can be an orc hearing you coming up the pass. It can be a ray of light that is meant to sense anyone who disturbs the dust within. It could be a tripwire. It could be a pressure plate. It could be, I don't know, a legion of insects, and when they're disturbed, they all pour into this big vessel, and then the vessel becomes too heavy, and it goes down, and it lifts this other thing, and it causes a spike to hit you in the face. A trigger is a way to activate your trap. I also have these crystals down here. Crystals, to me, are a bit of a key, and I just am using crystals right here to imply this notion, but it's a key. A key is a movable object, a portable object that can be used to outdo the trap. Now, are you going to use every one of these concepts in every single trap? No. But we're giving you a master kit, and then we're going to start making stuff in this thing. You got the touch. Okay, next we have like this freaky gadget. This is some kind of weird machine, a transmogrifier of some kind. And I have another little sort of backup machine to go with it. What does that do? I don't know. But weird machines are constantly playing into traps. And this is what I wanted to bring in, is machines. It could be anything mechanical, because mechanical things bring with them so many implications. It's a category worth improving, or including. It's also worth improving, to be honest, but it's a category worth including in the trap abstract, because it has so many different permutations and so many nice, tasty, implied details that players can fill in as they play. Everyone knows about weird machines. Everybody can imagine them with relative ease. and you can imagine them doing things that are difficult to explain otherwise. Well, it's just some weird machinery doing all that stuff, right? It always makes sense, especially in a fantasy world. That's it. That's all we get. And then I just have my baseboard, my void box here. And so what is this is going to do? It's going to give us the fundamentals to start building what I see as archetypes for traps. So we're not gonna build like, as many as we could, because we would be here forever. There's thousands of possibilities. But we're gonna build 3 types to show concepts that use these bits and pieces in different ways. So if you kind of fly up here a little bit, I'm gonna build these 3 trap types right here all together, and we're just gonna talk through them and look at how on a small and a large scale, the concepts involved in trap building are what is going to give you this notion of how to build cool gameplay no matter what it is you're doing. So let's just, just kind of. Okay, now I'm going to be sort of off camera for a good bit of this here, but I think it's more important that your eyes and your brain are down inside this board. Let's start with the silliest one, which is right here. This is the most simple one, and probably the one that you're the most used to. This is the trapped floor. So we got our basics here. Here's your bait. It pulls you in, right? Hey, look, let's go get that chest. Look, there's a lever up there, but you don't notice that because no one ever makes perception rolls. Your space is confined to this corridor. I've got a pressure plate right here. Again, just has to be found. I'm only showing it for the sake of demonstrating this concept. You walk out across here. Here, where's my green mini? Here he is. He steps on this. Dex check. He fails. This is gone. It changes. These spikes come flying up through the floor. He takes a bunch of damage. Eventually someone gets all the way across, they pull this lever, the plate no longer has to be avoided, and the spikes are tracked, and the trap is done. Now they can get what's in the chest. This type of trap is very common, and its most common use is to basically wear characters down a little bit, to hurt them a little bit. Next, we have this one. So let's say I enter right here. So this is this space right here, including this torch. The torch is light in this case, right? It's a form of machinery. It's a device that's going to change the landscape of things. We have this monster over here. Oh my gosh. When you come in, the door closes behind you, so now you have your confined space. Then if there's nothing else here, escape is now your bait. So how the hell do I get out of here? Oh my God. This thing attacks. They begin fighting. It's unharmable. It's completely invincible until they begin to examine the room and get some more details. Oh, weird. There's a weird crystal here. There's some kind of plate in the ground over here. What do I do? Okay, I'm jumping up and down on it. Nothing's happening. Okay, I'll grab the crystal. I'll put it here. Oh, the door goes, opens up. And now the monster also can be harmed. Like he loses his magic armor aura when this crystal is placed in this socket. The torch is here to offer illumination and to give a clue. If you want this trap to be harder, you don't give them the torch. This is in the darkness. This is also in the darkness. It's like back here somewhere and harder to discover. So there's a lot of combat going on before they realize, man, I just can't beat this thing. What am I supposed to do? How are we supposed to... Oh, wait, what's that? A crystal. Oh, okay, well, what do I do with that? Oh my God, I'm going to get killed. Oh, put it here. Okay, he's vulnerable. The door is slowly opening. All I have to do is survive long enough to get out of here. Then maybe get a rope on this thing, pull it off, and when it comes off, the door slams shut again. So you see, you're just using your trap pieces to create a tense situation where you are confined, you have a lure, you have a key, you have a pressure plate, you have an enemy, and you get all of this gameplay. Next, we have this one here, which is that there is a door. This is my bait. The door is my bait because, characters or players love doors. They have to go through them. To leave a door unexplored is really a weird feeling. But there's this giant behemoth between you and the door, and you just can't get around the damn thing. You're like, what the heck? And then as you turn around, you notice that the back wall is slowly creeping inward like this. And this thing isn't like inanimate. It is planted right there, and it is alive, and it will eat you when you come close. And this is your time. Time is limited. What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? Well, there's this weird machine here. So I'm going to hit this machine, okay? The machine serves different functions. It can stop the wall from moving temporarily. It can also send out like arcs of energy, or it can change the floor. It can change the walls in some fun way. And it can zap this thing and release it from its spot. So in this case, your machinery also functions as a key. Maybe this thing is bound by these weird like metal calipers in the floor, and you can figure out a combination on this machine to release it, and this thing begins crawling around. You pull it away from the door, come here and kill me, and then run over and get through the door. So you've got time that's limited, you've got space that's limited, you've got machinery, you've also got a key, you've got a door, an enemy. So you just have all these pieces. Does it have to play out this way? No. And you as the DM, you don't need to worry about how it's going to be solved, only the setups. Trying to design solutions isn't always the funnest way to do traps, but that's a little bit wider discussion than just these little examples that I just wanted to provide. I just wanted to show some fun examples of how I just think in my terrain. Finally, we have this crazy one back here, so I'll just pull these. Let's clean up a little bit here. Okay, so I see this machine, and maybe this is like a teleporter. This is my bait. It's also my machinery. It seems to be able to do more things than just teleport me, but I need the teleporter to get back to the surface of Krell or whatever. And so I'm faced with this space right here. We can reuse our walls. This confines the space. You see, so, whoa, I came in this door, you know, and a super all-time classic is the door shuts behind you and locks. You know, there's no way out. It's kind of really, really fundamental, simple shit. Another way is that the door collapses when you come in. Another one is that there's monsters in pursuit, and the door is all that's holding them back, so you're in here, right? And so this is all part of showing that it isn't necessarily that there's a master concept at work here. It's just that with the pieces in your vocabulary, you begin to see scenarios. So these things are keeping you from getting out, so your space is confined, and you have a sense of time. So now I go in, whoa, what is all this stuff? There's these three sort of, we'll call them flame cannons around this machine. I know I need to get to the machine. What am I supposed to do? Right away, the flame cannon shoots at me. Holy crap! What does a player do? You get behind this block. So the flames continue to blast, but the block is giving me cover. The minute I step out, it sees me and blasts me. Now, I don't really know as the dungeon master how you're supposed to solve this. Maybe you destroy this thing. Maybe you can hack this thing in some way or change it in a way that will disable or control these emitters. Maybe you can move the cover, so you move it, you know, Zelda style, just far enough so you can get close and jump in to the teleporter. Maybe you can levitate this thing and smash the emitter. Maybe you can use a freeze spell and freeze the... I don't know, you can do all kinds of things. You could fly up here, and they can only aim so high, and they can't... And you get up there and stuff. Whatever, but the reason that this is a trap is because there is bait. There is a limit to space. I am pressing you into harm. This is being triggered by your presence. There is sort of some implied ways to avoid harm, but it's a trap. This whole thing is I'm bringing you in here so I can hurt you. That's a trap. Another way is you could throw a treasure chest in here. Then it's like, oh, look at that. Or you could put the treasure chest up here. You could have it right here and have all this stuff hidden. Here, look, you could do this. There's like a false wall like this. This whole thing is behind this false wall. I don't have it on the table yet. They come in. They barely get the door closed to hold the Shoggoths at bay. Oh, thank God. Hey, look, a treasure chest. Isn't that great? By opening it, it removes these two elements of architecture, and then you have the rest. So I know that this seems just like open-ended, right? I'm just kind of running on and just kind of going for it. But that, to me, is the essence of trap theory, is that let's say I'm going this way in the dungeon. Let's say I just resolved this and I'm over that. So I come in, I open the door. Oh God, 2 Shoggoths. I begin battling the Shoggoths. But back here, I have a machine. And this is upon, running a wisdom roll or perception roll, whatever, I discover this is like a lightning emitter machine. And this thing is amazingly powerful. Oh man, I could use that to kill these guys. So you see, I have my bait, but I also have my machinery. It's going to pull a player through, so they're like, I just got to get to that thing. Right here, there's a bunch of combat that happens as he goes past. He reaches this thing, and it like winds up and doesn't work. It goes, and upon, an int roll, he realizes, yeah, if he can just get this thing running, it will fry these two things. But it goes, and it's not working. He's like, what's the deal here? So he looks around, he's like, oh, what's that stuff back there? I see stuff. And he's like, what is this? 2 crystals and a lever. Well, you guys can figure that out, right? So you put them together, they start arcing, throw the lever, This goes, it's ready to turn on, but these things are closing in. Oh my God, one more combat roll, 1 hit point. Oh my God, pull the lever, failed the roll, crap, it bites me again. I fall over, but then, I rolled a 20 at the last second to pop. I barely pull the lever as I'm making my con roll to survive. It fries these two things. So you see, it's all a trap. It's all a matter of baiting and confining, and then baiting, and then confining, and then baiting and confining, and then springing. So you bait, you confine, you spring, you bait, you confine, you spring. All of gameplay becomes a series of traps. It's not just tripwires, pressure plates, and spiked pits and stuff. It can be anything. Okay, so now that we just sort of riffed around with our terrain a little bit, what about time is so interesting? Well, let's think about it in 3 different sort of categories. All right, you have moments, you have hours, and you have days. That's how I think. So join me in thinking that way. Now, for me to boldly say everything you do in your tabletop game should be a trap, right? That is very hard to take very seriously unless all you ever do is crawl through hostile dungeons, right? You're just like, dude, I can't make my whole game a trap. That is just, what are you talking about? That's crazy. What about these conversations with people in the courtyard of the castle? And what about negotiating with the Elven Prince to release the prisoner that we need to save the flying sky galleon from the mind flayers? And then what about that other time when we're falling in love and then they killed my fiance and I had to make my stand and argue my case without fighting because it's a diplomatic culture that could kill us at any moment? Okay. How do you fit all that stuff into this trap mindset? You do exactly the same fundamentals that we just talked about. You bait them in, you confine them, and you spring. But you are doing it in these 3 different categories of time. The easiest one to conceive of is moments. Making traps that function in moments is quite intuitive, right? In a matter of seconds, I go from hitting a tripwire, like, what is that? And then ting, and then spikes. Whoosh, and I'm like, and then somebody else goes, dude, get out of there. And then they're like, here's some healing. Thank you, my pectorals are mended. And then go over and then, and the spikes go, and we're like, whew. Okay, that all happened in the span of a few moments. But I baited them in, I sprung it, I confined them so they couldn't just avoid it, right? So we had our pieces there, and it all happened in a matter of seconds. That's the easiest type of trap to conceive of. When I open the chest, it awakens the Shoggoths, they jump on me, right? That happens in a matter of seconds. Very easy to conceive of, but makes lots of dungeon crawling play exciting. Okay, the second one now gets slightly more interesting in terms of hours. What's a trap that takes hours to play out? Well, for me, this would be something like a conjuring ritual. So just like in the Doom Vault in ICRPG, you have a sort of a large-scale timer going on the dungeon as a whole to draw you all the way down to the bottom to stop the ritual to summon the Ogdru, right? These like sort of elder gods. But the exact same crap is taking place. I'm luring you, I'm confining you, and I'm springing. So how am I luring you? Well, you have to go to the bottom of the dungeon. I know, aberrant architecture design. The only place to really get done what you want is at the very bottom. That is not how malls are designed, right? Or wait, is it? That is how malls are designed, to get you to walk past all the stores. Anyway, same concept. We need to get you all the way to the bottom of the dungeon. That's the only place that your job can get done. And the player's like, I knew it, right? Confine. How do we confine them? Well, it's a dungeon. Easy enough. Now, in a non-dungeon case like the Borderlands or a mountain pass, you need to be a little more creative with it. You can use cliffs, use things like an avalanche, landslide, mud, river, rapids, waterfall, stuff like that. In a castle setting, you can use huge wall drop-offs. You can use battlements. You can use like spiked fencing, stuff like that. But you confine them so that the trap is meaningful. You can't just walk around it. And then spring. How do I spring the sort of the Doom Vault case? Well, there's a bunch of bad guys in there, and when you go in, they hate you. So the whole dungeon is a trap that takes place over the course of hours. So with a trap that takes place over a course of moments, usually what's at stake is hit points. Hit points or maybe life or death. But usually hit points. That's what you're struggling for second to second, is your survival or your hit points. Over the course of hours, what's at stake is more like resolution or victory or prevention in the case of Doomvault. You have to stop this ritual from occurring. What's at stake is the solving of the goal of that session or series of sessions that make that dungeon. This is where we're talking in a trap that takes hours to play out. Another trap that could take hours to play out, that's Lord of the Rings terminology, is with Smaug, right? The lure is to get in there and get the Arkenstone. You have to go in. The confinement is that you're under Erebor, so you've got to be down in there. You can't just walk around Smaug and get the Arkenstone. And then the spring is when Smaug knows that you're in there and you have to battle Smaug. So you see, that trap took the course of hours to play out too, with Bilbo and Smaug having that huge conversation, right? In this case, the key to that trap was this sort of flattery, or this sort of verbal judo that Bilbo did, right? That was the disabling of the snare. So do you see how a trap can go from a very small, very detailed concept into a much more abstract and interesting concept, but with the same elements in play? And it is not a puzzle, it is a trap. The puzzle isn't how do I escape Smaug? And then I could just sit there and, Smaug is like asleep forever, and I'm just kind of like, well, it doesn't feel right. The word doesn't apply. Trap is what that was. That was a trap, and the Arkenstone was the bait. Boosh. There it is. Okay, finally, this is the wildest one. Days, months, even years. What's a trap that plays out over days, months, or even years? Well, that's weird. Let's stick with Tolkien as our sort of rallying point, okay, right now. The trap is the rings of power, and especially the One Ring. This is the trap. It's the lure of power. And the lure of power is so potent that entire kingdoms rise and fall as this single trap is playing out. The trap is for Sauron to darken the hearts of men. That's what he's going to spring on them. The lure is incredible power. And the confinement is sort of in their own hearts in some ways, but it's also the kingdom, the realms, right? They can't just abandon the realms. If they do, Sauron's going to take it all. They have to stay in the corridor, which in this case is a very large area. So you can see as the time that a trap takes to play out, so does its space and its historical scale. But you still think of it as a trap, and this is what's going to help you creatively. Oh my God. So let's say you're designing the big bad for your campaign. Remember, you don't want to plot out a campaign because players do that. But you can give them a big seed. There is this ancient dragon. He is called Durathrax. Some say it's a female. She is called Durathrax. She has a few different forms. Anyway, she is eating the heart of the world. It's literally this big beating heart, and she's feeding on it. If she finishes her meal, the world will wither and die, and it'll be a black wasteland for the next 10,000 years. There's my bait. I have now lured the players to go find Durathrax. Remember, you almost always spring a trap because you're going somewhere you don't want to go. Traps aren't in your kitchen. Traps are like down that dark corridor down there, and you're like, we shouldn't go down there, dude. There's got to be spikes in the ceiling. But because the bait is so potent, you have to risk it. That's how I'm going to pull you into Durathrax's sort of plot in my campaign design, right? Now, how do I confine them? Durathrax's lair, of course, which happens to be a massive, endless labyrinth under the ground that includes an ocean and islands and these different factions that are worshiping and or fighting Durathrax. I got a whole little geology going. I got a whole geography going underground for this whole thing. And then spring. How do I spring it? Well, in the beginning, I spring the low-level things. Then they begin to get Durathrax's attention. Maybe they find eggs. The eggs are one of the triggers in my big trap. And if they get those eggs, then that gets Durathrax mad. She is sprung. And, oh, damn, that dragon is sprung. Anyway, she flies out, and that's their first encounter because they mess with the eggs. But you see, what's useful to me here is the concept of trapping, luring, confining, and springing. Luring, confining, and springing. And thinking of it, whether it's a tiny moment where a stick comes down out of a tree and pokes you in the eye for 1 hit point because you stepped on a little thing that was propped up like that. Or whether it's a castle that's crumbling and we have to get the princess out. And actually there's a mage who's in there who's destroying the castle. And if we can just stop him, we can disarm the trap of this castle. Or if it's an entire story arc where the lure is ultimate evil or ultimate destruction, The key is some relic or some ritual to stop it all. And the trigger is delving too deep to find the key and awakening ancient evil forces. Those ancient evil forces are no different than this little 3x3 grid of spikes. This is also Durathrax. This is Sauron. Conceptually, I know this is a little crazy, but you can see how creatively it can get this pull or this motion in what you design for your table that is more dynamic, more dangerous, and more directly just, it pulls the players in and narrows, funnels them down, and then again and again and again in different forms and different ways. And that is what I call trap theory.